Shabbat Shalom. So our Torah portion for today is called Toldot, literally meaning generations. So let's quickly go through the overview of this entire Torah portion. It starts out with Isaac and Rebekah. They are childless for about 20 years. They have twins. They name them Esau and Jacob. Esau sells his birthright to Jacob. Isaac redigs Abraham's wells. Jacob receives a firstborn blessing that was supposed to be to Esau. Esau receives a servant's blessing. Esau plans to kill Jacob. Jacob receives Abraham's blessing. And then the Torah portion concludes with Esau marrying a daughter from Ishmael. So we will be covering points 1 and 2. They kind of go through together. They merge together. But we'll be focusing on points 4 and 5 mainly. This is Isaac. He redigs Abraham's wells. And then Jacob receives a firstborn blessing, but looking at it from Esau. Why? Because this Torah portion is more than generations of Isaac. It is about the generations within each of us, the inner struggle. Within the Torah portion's family drama lies a spiritual pattern in the inner struggles of our personal Jacob and Esau, and hopeful but quiet redemptive work of Isaac. This is the unseen hand of Adonai shaping destinies beneath the surface. Toldot is not just about the next generation. It is about the continuation of Abraham's faith through challenge, testing, and the quiet persistence of spiritual work. So let's start with Isaac and Rebekah. They have been married for about 20 years before Rebekah becomes pregnant with twins. Her pregnancy was so painful that she cries out to Adonai, and Rebekah is given an immediate response. In Genesis 25, verse 23, Adonai answered her. He says, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 separate peoples shall issue from your body. One person shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Or in the Hebrew, you can literally translate it like the elder, the younger will serve. See, Rebekah, she felt turmoil even before her sons were born. God tells Rebekah that not only is she pregnant with 2 children, but 2 nations with all their personalities, all their behaviors, but also their interests are clashing in the womb. They are contending with each other. Basically, who should serve? The older should serve the younger, or the younger should serve the older. Jacob and Esau are both part of the human design, or the spiritual tension between the physical and the spiritual, as some might term the outer man versus the inner man. Jewish understanding is saying that Yetzer HaRa, this is the one that are driven by appetites, or the Yetzer HaTov, the one driven by holiness. Within the Torah portion, we see Jacob. He reaches upward. He becomes a mild man, a person of study, remaining in the tents toward faith and discipline. Where Esau, he reaches outward toward the field, the hunt, and the physical world. We see this alluded in Genesis chapter 25, verses 27 through 28. When the boys grew up, Esau became a man knowledgeable in hunting, an outdoorsman, while Jacob was a mild man remaining in tents. Now, Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Taking this deeper than most would like to go, Jacob and Esau are both within us. Every day, we wrestle between 2 natures, the nature to drive, to take, or the nature to call, to transform, the urge to conquer, or the invitation to cultivate. The truth is, both forces are needed. The goal is not to destroy Esau, but to redeem him, to take that fiery drive, the strength, the passion, and bring it under the guidance of Jacob's wisdom. We see this tension throughout our Torah portion, even with Isaac. Unlike the father, Abraham, Isaac's life seems quieter. He doesn't move far. The total of Isaac's travels is roughly about 90 miles, making him the most geographically stable of the patriarchs. Isaac never leaves the land of Canaan, doesn't get a name change, and he doesn't start a revolution. What does he do? He preserves, he maintains, and he restores. Let's go to Genesis chapter 26, starting in verse 1. Now there was a famine in the land aside from the previous famine that happened in Abraham's days. Then Adonai appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land about which I tell you. Live as a sojourner or an outsider in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and I will confirm my pledge that I swore to Abraham your father, and in your seed all the nations of the earth will continually be blessed. And at the end of verse 6, look what it says. So Isaac stayed or settled in Gerar. Isaac's greatness lies in his steadfastness, in reopening what others have buried, in keeping alive what could easily be forgotten. While Abraham was and is the pioneer of faith, Isaac is the guardian of that faith. His work is quieter, but not smaller. Notice that Adonai said sojourn in the land, not settle. This is to live lightly, dependently. This is to live as a stranger with purpose, not to settle permanently. This is a refusal to claim ownership where God gives stewardship. This command creates a spiritual posture of faith and humility. But it seems that Isaac started to build permanent roots, living in the city of Gerar, where conflicts happened. Going to Genesis 26, verse 12, then Isaac sowed in that land, and in that year reaped 100-fold. Adonai blessed him, and the man became great, and continued to become greater until he became very great. Then the Philistines envied him. With blessing, trouble arises, so Isaac moves, and it would seem that he is learning what he is supposed to be, a sojourner, not a city dweller. Look in verse 17, Genesis 26. So Isaac departed from there, camped in the valley of Gerar, and dwelled or settled there. But the shepherds of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's shepherds, and saying, the water is ours. So he named the well quarrel or contention, Esek, because they quarreled with him. Notice that Isaac moved, but he does the same thing as before. He settled instead of pitching his tent. So he named this well disagreement, Esek, because they quarreled with him. The Philistines argued and claimed that the water was theirs. Spiritually speaking, this is the stage when our attempt to recover Adonai's command and virtue of Abraham, this provokes resistance. Our response in this stage can be to justify, to vindicate, to fight, to make it right. But Isaac models another way. Keep digging. Genesis 26, verse 21. Then he dug another well. They quarreled over it. So he named it accusation, Sitnah. The second well is literally named hostility or harassment. The opposition intensifies. This stage proves whether the first perseverance was sturdy. Here at this well, the tension is deeper than surface disputes. This is where emotions mobilize allies, such as shame, blame, bitterness. But not for Isaac. He kept on digging. Then comes the third well. Genesis 26, verse 22. Then he moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he named it Wide Spaces, Rechavot, and said, because now Adonai has created wide spaces for us, and we will be fruitful in the land. The verb in the Hebrew, he moved from there, vayatek, is from the root to pull up or to move forward and onward. It conveys spiritual relocation, not just mere movement, but a transition with purpose. It is the physical reflection of sojourner. This is where Isaac is starting to have the sojourner's heart that moves when God leads. This is why he named it Rechavot, wide spaces. This is called breakthrough. Notice the casual flow. Persistence through contention. Hostility before open spaces. Rechavot, wide spaces, points forward to the enlargement of the covenant, blessing that will reach beyond the family line. After Rechavot, the text says that Isaac moved from there and dug another well. Genesis 26, verse 25. So he built an altar there and called on the name of Adonai. Look what he says. He pitched his tent there. Isaac's servants hollowed out a well there. Isaac has finally pitched his tent. He has finally learned his purpose and listened to the command to sojourn. This is the purpose or the lesson that God was teaching. You sojourn until God opens spaces. Then comes the covenant blessing. Look in Genesis 26, verse 32. Now it happened that on that day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they dug and said to him, we have found water. So he called it pledge or oath, Shiva. This is why the city's name is Beersheba to this day. Beersheba is not a separate notion or an afterthought. This well is the covenantal marker. It recalls Abraham's oath with the same Abimelech in Genesis chapter 21. When Isaac arrives, he builds an altar, calls on the name of Adonai. The other wells that we just went through was the process. Beersheba is the purpose, the confirmation of Adonai's faithfulness. The digging of the wells taught Isaac patience. The covenant at Beersheba gave the other wells purpose. The living water becomes the promise. When Adonai's oath meets our perseverance, our persistence, this is the inner transformation that is meant to lead us to worship and to be settled on trust that is not rooted in houses or possessions, but on God alone. Beersheba, at this well, is where labor becomes liturgy. Digging becomes covenant. Isaac went through a major transformation. And now in our Torah portion, he will encourage Esau to do the same, to take his gifts and redeem him so he can take that fiery drive, that strength, that passion, and bring it under the guidance of Adonai's wisdom. Later in the Torah portion, Isaac, he is old. His eyes are dim, and he calls Esau and says this. We're going to Genesis 27, verse 2. Look, I am old, he said. I don't know the day of my death. So now, please, take your gear, your quiver, and bow, and get out into the field and hunt me some game. Then prepare me a delicious meal that I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die. Question. Why this ritual? Why food, hunting, tasting before a spiritual blessing? Let's be honest, at first glance, this sounds material, even carnal. But we are forced to ask, why is Isaac linking the sacred blessing to food? I don't know. But, but a rabbi named Samson Hirsch, he reveals that each word opens a layer of meaning. He points out that for the word eating in Hebrew means to consume or to know. The word for tasty or delicious meal in the Hebrew comes from the root word of ta'am, which means to judge or to establish judgment. Figuratively speaking, discerning through tasting. And then the word for bracha, it comes from the root of barach, figuratively meaning to cause something to grow, to cause something to develop, or to flow. The point that Rabbi Hirsch is making, Isaac's purpose was not indulgence. It was redirection. He wanted to guide Esau's consuming passion and power towards using his hunting skills to benefit others. Because tradition tells us that Esau hunts not because he requires food, but because he derives pleasure from tracking and killing. Isaac wants to discern, is it possible for Esau to develop where Isaac can turn Esau's pleasure into hunting for a higher purpose, such as feeding the elderly, feeding the blind, for example? Isaac wants to show Esau that the tools of his trade can be used to serve higher goals. Why is this important? Because Isaac learned through his well transformation experience that the leader of the family cannot be dedicated only to satisfying his own desires, but has to be prepared to provide for others. Before the blessing of Isaac can be given, he needs to change Esau's pattern of behavior. Nowhere also, why is Isaac's soul involved in this blessing? Because nowhere in the entire Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, do we find that a blessing is issuing from the soul. You can read it as Isaac was aware of his son's shortcomings and sought to compensate for them, or you can read it as Isaac's desires came from the depths of his being, like a father yearning to redeem his son's potential. Look at Isaac's blessing in Genesis 27, verse 28. My God will give you from the dew of the sky and from the fatness of the land an abundance of grain and new wine. Even though this blessing was through human deception, Adonai's divine design moved forward. Isaac starts by connecting heaven and earth. Overall, his words are filled not with hunting or warfare, but with fruitfulness. The blessing speaks of fields, not forests, cultivation, not conquest. It is a language of peace, provision, partnership with the creation. This blessing is probably coming from that place of knowing at the final well, Beersheba. The covenantal blessing that points to the prophetic time where the swords are beaten into plowshares, to the expansion of the covenant to the nations, to a peace that flows beyond the borders, beyond contention, beyond rivalry. So what do we learn from Toldot, from this Torah portion? And how do we apply it for our everyday living? Well, we start with point number 1. Reopen the old wells. Return to the deep places of prayer, scripture, and gratitude that the world has filled with dust. Our lives are a field of wells. And the pattern that Isaac reveals, they are stages. Starts with the first stage, repossession, where some wells are blocked. And yes, we're always going to find resistance where some wells are flowing. Then comes from us persistence, where some wells are still waiting to be rediscovered. The question is, at this stage, are you going to stop at life's first pushback, or are you going to keep digging? And once you decide you're going to keep digging, we go to point number 2. Move from strife to spaciousness. Don't settle in Esek, fighting, or don't settle in Setna, hostility. Keep digging until you reach Rechavot. In these stages, each shovel of earth we remove, each act of forgiveness, humility, patience, in the digging process that brings the living waters closer to the surface. Then comes stage 3. Live as a sojourner. Don't cling to comfort. Dwell lightly. Trust Adonai's guidance. Then comes 4. Transform your drives. Like Isaac's vision for Esau, turn your natural gifts toward holy purposes for the kingdom of heaven. Then comes point 5. Let peace be your wellspring. When Yeshua's living waters flow freely, there is no need to strive with others. Yes, the peace that Isaac found at Rechavot, the well of spaciousness, was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of aligning his life finally with Adonai's purpose that led him into a state of thankfulness and covenant confirmation. This is where we are allowing Adonai to elevate our natural drives into holy service, the process where we can redeem our internal Esau. When we do that, we will find that the same tools that once brought conflict can now bring compassion. The same field that once dried you can now become wide, peaceful place. May we too reopen the wells of faith, transform our hunting into holiness, and pass on, like Isaac, to the Toldot of tomorrow, the next generation. That is the living waters of righteousness, humility, and peace. And with that, chazak u'baruch, be strong and be blessed. Let's bring the worship team back up.